millionaire's maid accused of stealing a valuable jewel. But when a surprise witness enters the courtroom, everything changes. What is revealed shocks everyone. On a day like any other, Sophia's world came crashing down. The dedicated maid, who had served diligently for years at Marisa's mansion, suddenly found herself accused of a crime she did not commit. The emerald, a precious and glittering gem, had gone missing, and in the eyes of her wealthy employer, there could only be one culprit: the woman who cleaned and maintained the house day after day. With no chance for defense, not even a minute to explain herself, Sophia was dismissed. Marisa's words, sharp as knives, cut deep. "Out! I don't want to see your face around here anymore." The shock of the false accusation mixed with the pain of the abrupt dismissal. But beneath the weight of anguish, a flame ignited in Sophia's chest. She knew of her innocence, and this certainty drove her forward. "I won't let them treat me like this," she thought, clenching her fists. The fight for the truth began there, on the sidewalk in front of the mansion, with a woman determined to prove that honesty still matters in this world. The journey back home never seemed so long for Sophia. Each step was a Herculean effort, as if she were carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. The familiar streets now seemed strange, distorted by the lens of the injustice she had just endured. The jasmine scent from the neighbor's garden, which normally cheered her, now seemed to mock her sadness. Upon crossing the threshold, she found Diego's concerned gaze, her husband and safe haven. The tears, until then held back, finally streamed freely down her face. Diego immediately put down the newspaper he was reading, his face contorting in a mix of surprise and worry. "Sophia, what happened?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. Between choked sobs, Sophia poured out the whole situation. Her words came in a rush, mingled with tears and indignation. Diego embraced her tightly, as if wanting to protect her from all the world's harm. The warmth of his embrace was like balm for Sophia's wounded soul. "Calm down, my love. We'll solve this together," he whispered, his voice steady as a rock amid the storm that was upon them. Diego wasted no time. With the determination of someone who won't tolerate injustice, he began to formulate a plan. He grabbed a notepad and a pen, sitting down at the kitchen table. "Let's go to the police station," he declared, scribbling furiously. "We need to file a police report. After that, we'll find a lawyer. Remember Dr. Oliveira? He can help us." As he prepared Sophia to face what lay ahead, Diego already visualized each step they would take. He had Sophia sit down, made a calming tea, and encouraged her to eat something light. "You need to be strong for this fight," he said, holding her hands between his. The struggle would be tough, but together they were ready to face it. The rest of the night was spent in preparation. Diego called some friends, seeking advice and support. Sophia, slowly regaining her strength, began to write down everything she remembered about the incident. When they finally went to bed, exhausted but determined, they knew that the next day would mark the beginning of a long journey in pursuit of justice. The next morning, Sophia and Diego headed to the police station, their hearts heavy but full of hope. The gray and austere building seemed intimidating, but they knew it was the necessary first step. Upon entering, they were met by Officer Santos, a middle-aged man with tired but attentive eyes. Sophia took a deep breath and began to recount her story. Every detail, every word exchanged with Marisa, every moment of that fateful day was meticulously described. Officer Santos listened attentively, occasionally jotting notes and interrupting only to ask relevant questions. His expression was neutral, but his eyes revealed a genuine interest in the case. After hearing the entire account, Santos leaned back in his chair, thoughtful. "I understand the gravity of the situation," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I will personally visit Mrs. Marisa's residence to investigate. We need to hear both sides of the story." As Sophia and Diego left the station, a mix of relief and apprehension accompanied them. The investigation had begun, but the road ahead was still uncertain and full of challenges. Officer Santos knocked on the door of Marisa's mansion, his impeccable uniform contrasting with the ostentatious luxury of the facade. When the door opened, revealing the haughty figure of the millionaire, the air seemed to grow denser. Marisa, with her elegant bearing and piercing gaze, did not appear at all disturbed by the police presence. "Officer, how can I assist you?" she asked, her mellifluous voice tinged with a hint of arrogance. Santos explained the reason for his visit, observing Marisa's reactions closely. She invited him inside, leading him to a living room that seemed straight out of a period film. As Marisa reiterated her accusations against Sofia, Santos noticed small details. The slight tremor in her voice when she mentioned the emerald, the way her eyes momentarily diverted when talking about the day of the alleged theft. These were subtle signs, but to an experienced investigator, they spoke volumes. However, as the conversation progressed, Santos found himself facing an almost insurmountable wall. Marisa not only maintained her accusations but reinforced them with unwavering conviction. She casually mentioned names of influential figures in the city, subtly indicating the extent of her power and connections. As he left the mansion, Santos felt the weight of reality settling on his shoulders. He knew that fighting against someone like Marisa would be a tough battle. The evidence was scant, based mainly on words, those of a maid versus those of a well-respected millionaire in society. Back at the station, Santos faced an ethical and professional dilemma. He believed in Sofia's innocence. His instincts screamed that something was wrong with Marisa's story. But how to prove it? How to confront the power and influence of one of the city's wealthiest individuals? Sitting at his desk, surrounded by piles of papers and the monotonous hum of ceiling fans, Santos began to chart his next steps. He knew he needed to be cautious, meticulous, and above all, persistent. The truth was there, buried beneath layers of privilege and prejudice, and he was determined to uncover it, no matter the cost. Meanwhile, at home, Sofia and Diego waited anxiously for news. Every phone ring, every passing car made their hearts leap. The wait was agonizing, but they clung to the hope that justice would prevail. Little did they know that the struggle was just beginning, and the toughest challenges were yet to come. The sun had barely risen when Sofia felt a sudden dizziness. The world around her began to spin, colors blending into a dizzying spiral. "Diego," she managed to murmur before her legs gave way. The dull thud of her body hitting the kitchen floor echoed through the house, causing Diego to rush desperately. "Sofia! Oh my God, Sofia!" Diego's voice was filled with panic as he knelt beside his wife. His hands trembled as he checked her breathing, a momentary relief as he felt a faint breath. Without wasting a second, he grabbed the phone, his fingers frantically dialing the emergency number. The minutes that followed seemed like an eternity. The sound of the siren growing in the distance was music to Diego's ears. When the paramedics arrived, the scene was one of pure emotional chaos. Diego, always so strong, now seemed like a lost child, answering the professionals' questions with a choked voice. At the hospital, the diagnosis hit like a punch to the stomach. Sofia had suffered a collapse due to extreme stress. Her body, exhausted by the emotional strain of recent days, had simply given up. The doctor, a middle-aged man with compassionate eyes, explained the situation to Diego. "She needs intensive care," he said, his grave voice echoing through the sterile corridors. Diego felt the weight of the world on his shoulders. The treatment was expensive, far beyond their current financial means. With Sofia unemployed and him working a modest job, how could they afford such costs? The cruel reality of the situation hit him like a lightning bolt, but amidst the despair, a flame of determination ignited in Diego's chest. He looked at Sofia, pale and fragile in the hospital bed, and made a silent promise. He would do whatever it took to save her. He began to mentally list all the friends and family who could help, every penny that could be saved, every item that could be sold. Leaving the hospital room, Diego picked up his cell phone. His hand still trembled, but his voice was steady as he made the first call. "Hi, João. It's Diego. I need your help." The marathon to raise the money for the treatment had begun. As he walked through the hospital corridors, Diego felt a mix of fear and hope. The path would be difficult, but he was ready to tread it, no matter how hard it might be. As the day went on, Diego found himself in a race against time. Each phone call, each visit to friends and family, was a battle against despair. Some doors closed, but others opened. Small amounts began to add up, giving him a glimmer of hope to cling to. Leaving the pawn shop, Diego sat on a nearby park bench, the weight of the situation threatening to crush him. He looked up at the sky, trying to draw strength from the vastness above. His phone buzzed with another message of support. Despite the challenges, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. With each passing hour, Diego's resolve hardened. He knew the journey was far from over, but as long as Sofia was fighting, he would fight alongside her. The battle for justice, for her health, and for their future was just beginning, and he was determined to see it through to the end. Curious, Diego approached and picked up one of the papers. It was a flyer for a temporary job fair happening the next day. His eyes quickly scanned the information. Companies looking for short-term workers, some offering daily wages. An idea began to form in his mind. Maybe he could take some of these jobs during the times he wasn't at the hospital with Sofia. It wouldn't be easy, but every penny counted at this critical moment. With renewed determination, Diego stood up, carefully tucking the flyer into his pocket. He would make a list of all the companies mentioned and contact them as soon as possible. Additionally, he decided he would visit a few temp agencies around the city. As he walked back to the hospital, his mind buzzed with possibilities. Maybe he could offer gardening services on weekends to neighbors, or perhaps find freelance work online that he could do during his spare moments at the hospital. The battle was far from over, and Diego wouldn't give up as long as there was a breath of hope. Each obstacle was just another challenge to be overcome, and he was determined to face them all, one by one, for Sofia's sake. The sun had barely risen when Diego left the house, carrying a heavy box in his arms. Inside were the few valuable items they still had. Each step toward the pawn shop felt like a stab to his heart, but the image of Sofia in the hospital bed drove him forward. In the shop, the attendant, already familiar with Diego, examined the items with experienced eyes. An old watch, a family heirloom, a set of silverware, a wedding gift, and finally, Sofia's engagement ring, the most valuable piece they owned. "Are you sure about this, son?" the attendant asked, noticing Diego's hesitation as he handed over the ring. Diego swallowed hard, remembering the day he had slipped it onto Sofia's finger. "I am," he replied, his voice steady despite the pain in his chest. "It's for her life." Leaving the shop with an envelope full of cash, Diego felt a mix of relief and regret. The money would help, but it was still far from enough. As he walked through the busy streets, his eyes fell on a sign, "Hair wanted." For a moment, Diego stopped, considering the idea. His hair was long and well kept, something Sofia had always praised. With a deep sigh, he entered the establishment. Minutes later, he walked out with short hair and a few more bills in his pocket. On his way to the hospital, Diego passed by a music store. In the window, he saw a guitar identical to his, the one he had had for years. With a heavy heart, he remembered the nights he played for Sofia, the songs they wrote together. Without hesitation, he went into the store. "How much would you pay for a used guitar in good condition?" he asked the salesman. As he negotiated, Diego felt as though he was selling a part of himself. But as he left the store with more money in his pocket, he knew he had made the right choice. Arriving at the hospital, Diego found Sofia awake, her eyes lighting up at the sight of him. She immediately noticed his short hair. "Diego, what?" she began to ask, but he interrupted her with a gentle kiss. "Don't worry, love. It's just hair. It grows back," he said, forcing a smile. He held her hand, feeling the absence of the engagement ring. Sofia didn't comment, but her eyes filled with tears of understanding and gratitude. That night, sitting beside Sofia's bed, Diego did the math. The sacrifices of the day had helped, but there was still much to be done. He looked out the window at the illuminated city and felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. Tomorrow would be another day of struggle, another day of sacrifice. But for Sofia, he was willing to give everything. The hospital room was quiet, except for the constant beeping of the monitors. Sofia, still weak but conscious, was idly flipping through a magazine when the door opened. To her surprise, it wasn't Diego or a nurse, but Officer Santos, accompanied by a man in a suit she didn't recognize. "Ms. Sofia," began Officer Santos, his grave voice echoing in the small room. "This is Dr. Oliveira, the lawyer assigned to your case. The man in the suit nodded gently, his eyes conveying a mix of compassion and determination. Santos continued, his tone becoming more serious. Unfortunately, things have gotten more complicated. Mrs. Marisa has formally pressed charges of theft against you. Sophia felt as though the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. Her breathing became labored, causing the monitors to beep in alarm. Dr. Oliveira approached, his calm voice contrasting with Sophia's internal turmoil. "Don't worry, Ms. Sophia. We're here to help. We have reasons to believe these charges are false, and we will fight to prove your innocence." In the days that followed, the hospital room became an improvised law office. Diego, splitting his time between temporary jobs and the hospital, watched the discussions between Sophia and Dr. Oliveira, often feeling powerless in the face of the legal complexities of the case. It was during one of these meetings that a glimmer of hope appeared. Dr. Oliveira, casually flipping through a gossip magazine, suddenly stopped. "Look at this," he said, his voice filled with excitement. On the page was a photo of Marisa at a gala event. Around her neck, shining under the flashlights, was the emerald supposedly stolen. "This is from 3 days ago," the lawyer explained, a smile forming on his lips. "After the date of the alleged theft." Sophia and Diego exchanged looks of hope and relief. It was the first concrete proof of her innocence. Dr. Oliveira immediately began formulating strategies. "We'll request the security footage from that event. If we can prove this is the same emerald, we'll have a strong case against the false charges." As the lawyer made calls and Officer Santos began the process of obtaining the footage, Sophia allowed herself, for the first time in weeks, to feel a glimmer of real hope. Diego held her hand, his eyes shining with renewed determination. "We're going to get through this, my love," he said, his voice firm despite the evident exhaustion. "Together, we'll prove your innocence and rebuild our life." That night, as the hospital gradually quieted, Sophia looked out the window at the city lights. The battle was far from over, but now, finally, they had a weapon to fight with. With Diego's unwavering love, Dr. Oliveira's support, and the truth on their side, Sophia felt, for the first time in a long time, that maybe, just maybe, justice could prevail. In the days following the discovery of the photo, Sophia's hospital room became a real command center. Dr. Oliveira, now more determined than ever, spent hours on the phone, making contacts and pressing for information. Diego, in turn, dedicated every free moment to helping with the investigation, researching online and gathering more evidence about the event where Marisa was photographed. One afternoon, while Sophia rested, Officer Santos arrived with news. "We've got the footage from the event," he announced, his usually serious face showing a slight smile. Dr. Oliveira immediately set up his laptop and everyone gathered around the small screen. The images were clear. Marisa could be seen arriving at the event, the emerald gleaming around her neck. The camera zoomed in, showing details of the jewel, including a small scratch on the side, exactly as Sophia had described when reporting the characteristics of the emerald she regularly cleaned at the mansion. "This is amazing," Diego whispered, his voice choked with emotion. Sophia squeezed his hand, tears of relief shining in her eyes. Dr. Oliveira, however, maintained his caution. "It's strong evidence, but we need more. Marisa might claim this is a different emerald." That's when Santos had an idea. "What if we could get a warrant to check Marisa's safe? If the stolen emerald is there along with the one she wore at the event?" The lawyer nodded, his eyes shining with possibility. "That would be the final blow. I'll file the request immediately." As the team worked tirelessly, Sophia faced her own challenges. The stress of the situation was affecting her recovery, and doctors expressed concern about her elevated blood pressure. Diego, torn between the desire to be by his wife's side and the need to fight for her innocence, felt the weight of the situation in every fiber of his being. One night, while everyone was out for dinner, Sophia received an unexpected visit. It was Maria, the housekeeper who had worked at Marisa's mansion for decades. With tears in her eyes, Maria confessed that she had seen Marisa putting the emerald in the safe on the day of the supposed theft, but had been afraid to speak out for fear of losing her job. "I can't live with this guilt anymore," Maria said, holding Sophia's hand. "I'll testify for you no matter the consequences." When Dr. Oliveira and Diego returned, they found Sophia with a new sparkle in her eyes. Maria's confession was the final piece of the puzzle, the definitive proof of her innocence. The lawyer immediately began preparing the new legal strategy, incorporating Maria's testimony into the already gathered evidence. Santos, in turn, expedited the process to obtain the search warrant for Marisa's safe. That night, as the hospital quieted down, Sophia and Diego shared a moment of renewed hope. The battle was still not won, but for the first time since the beginning of this nightmare, they could see the light at the end of the tunnel. "We're going to win this, my love," Diego whispered, gently kissing Sophia's forehead. "And when all this is over, we'll start our life anew, stronger than ever." Sophia smiled, feeling a peace she hadn't experienced in weeks. The road ahead was still uncertain, but with the truth on their side and Diego's unwavering love, she knew she would face any challenge that came. The day of the trial arrived, bringing with it a mix of anxiety and determination. The city courthouse, an imposing building of neoclassical architecture, seemed even more intimidating that morning. Sophia, still pale but with eyes shining with courage, entered the courtroom supported by Diego. The courtroom was packed. On one side, Marisa, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, with a barely concealed expression of disdain. On the other side, Sophia and Diego, modest but dignified, accompanied by Dr. Oliveira. The murmur of the audience hushed as the judge entered, a middle-aged man with sharp eyes behind thin-rimmed glasses. "All rise," announced the court officer, and the trial began. The prosecutor, a man with a powerful voice, presented the charges against Sophia, portraying her as an opportunistic employee who betrayed her employer's trust. His words seemed to cut through the air, each one making Sophia flinch slightly. When it was the defense's turn, Dr. Oliveira stood up with a calm that contrasted with the palpable tension in the room. "Your Honor," he began, his voice clear and confident, "what we have here is not a case of theft, but of a terrible injustice." With skill, the lawyer began to dismantle the accusations. He presented footage from the gala event, showing Marisa wearing the supposedly stolen emerald. The audience murmured in surprise, and even the judge raised his eyebrows. "But the definitive evidence, Your Honor," Dr. Oliveira continued, "is this." He made a gesture, and Maria, the housekeeper, entered the room. With a trembling but firm voice, she recounted seeing Marisa put the emerald in the safe on the day of the alleged theft. Marisa's face visibly paled. Her lawyer, realizing the direction the trial was taking, tried to object, claiming that the testimony was irrelevant. The judge, however, allowed Maria to continue. As the trial progressed, more evidence was presented. The search warrant for Marisa's safe had revealed not only the stolen emerald, but also documents suggesting a series of tax frauds. During the recess, Sophia and Diego embraced, their faces wet with tears of relief and hope. "We're almost there," Diego whispered, gently kissing his wife's forehead. When the court reconvened, the air was thick with anticipation. After hearing the closing arguments, the judge withdrew to deliberate. The minutes dragged on like hours, the silence in the courtroom broken only by the occasional nervous whisper. Finally, the judge returned. With a solemn voice, he delivered his verdict. "This court finds the defendant, Sophia, not guilty of all charges." The room erupted in reactions. Sophia collapsed into Diego's arms, sobbing with relief. Dr. Oliveira smiled, satisfied with the victory of justice. Marisa, on the other hand, was immediately approached by officials who informed her of the new fraud charges she would face. As they left the courthouse, surrounded by reporters and well-wishers, Sophia and Diego knew that their fight was over, but a new journey was just beginning. Sophia's recovery, rebuilding their lives, and overcoming the trauma of the past months would be challenges, but they were ready to face them together. That night, at home for the first time in weeks, Sophia looked out the window at the bright stars. "Thank you," she whispered, silently thanking everyone who had supported her through this difficult journey. Beside her, Diego smiled, knowing that no matter what the future held, they would face it together, stronger than ever. In the weeks following the trial, Sophia and Diego faced the challenge of rebuilding their lives. The victory in court had brought justice, but it had not erased the emotional and financial scars left by the ordeal. The couple found themselves at the start of a new beginning, full of uncertainties, but also possibilities. On a sunny Saturday morning, Sophia woke up early, the aroma of fresh coffee filling the small apartment they had rented temporarily. Diego was already up, reading the newspaper at the kitchen table. "Good morning, my love," he smiled, his tired eyes full of affection. Sophia joined him, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. "Any news?" she asked, noticing the job section open in front of him. Diego sighed. "A few possibilities, but nothing certain yet. And you, how are you feeling today?" "Better," Sophia replied, a small smile playing on her lips. "Actually, I've been thinking, what if we started our own business?" The idea surprised Diego. "A business? What kind of business?" Sophia explained her vision, a small cleaning company, specializing in high-end residences. "We know this market well, don't we? And with everything we've been through, we understand the importance of trust and integrity in this work." Diego listened attentively, his expression shifting from surprise to interest and finally to enthusiasm. "You know what? I think it could work. We have experience, we know people in the field, and with your reputation restored, many might want to support us." In the days that followed, the couple dedicated themselves to planning their new venture. Diego used his computer skills to create a simple but elegant website. Sophia contacted former colleagues and clients, explaining her new endeavor. To their surprise and joy, many were not only receptive but eager to help. The first major challenge came in the form of a bank loan. Sitting in front of the bank manager, Sophia and Diego presented their business plan. The manager listened attentively, asking insightful questions. At the end of the meeting, he smiled. "Your story is inspiring and your plan is solid. The bank is willing to support you." With the loan approved, the couple was able to purchase equipment, hire a few employees, and rent a small office. The opening day arrived, and although modest, the ceremony was full of emotion. Friends, family, and even Dr. Oliveira and Officer Santos attended to show their support. As the months passed, the business began to grow. Sophia and Diego worked tirelessly, building a reputation for excellence and reliability. Each new client was a victory, and each challenge overcome made them stronger. One night, almost a year after starting their entrepreneurial journey, Sophia and Diego sat on the porch of their new apartment, looking at the illuminated city. "Do you believe everything we went through?" Sophia asked, her voice soft. Diego hugged her, gently kissing her forehead. "Sometimes it feels like a dream. But look at us now, love. Not only did we survive, but we're thriving." Sophia smiled, feeling a wave of gratitude and hope. "You know what makes me most proud?" she asked. "It's not just the success of the business. It's how we're using our experience to help others, providing jobs, giving a second chance to people who, like us, faced injustices." Diego nodded, his eyes shining with emotion. "We've turned our pain into purpose. And that, my love, is the true victory." As the couple contemplated the future, they knew there would still be challenges ahead. But now, strengthened by adversity and united by love, they were ready to face any obstacle. Their story was not just one of overcoming but of transformation, a testament to the power of hope, determination, and unconditional love. Don't miss our upcoming emotional stories. Subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell to receive all updates. Click on the card to continue enjoying more stories that will touch your heart. Don't miss it.